Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is Feb 6, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant for allowing us to be on his podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. He's taking care of his child right now, and we really appreciate all his help. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Jason Lethcoe. Is
Yeah,
that how you pronounce it, Jason?
yep.
I got it. Yay. Jason, where are you calling in from?
Thousand Oaks, California.
All right. I'm in Venice, California, so we're on the right coast. And
Right.
what's the best thing for a human being?
Wow. Start right in there with a boom. I think the best thing for a human being are fostering relationships and not only looking to discover life's paths together, comparing notes, but trying to engage in a way that helps people feel like they can navigate from a positive place to me. It's like
Yeah.
I think there's so much doom and gloom, and when people see themselves as a victim, it takes you from this dark place that tends to see life as a obstacle course, where I think it can be more like a stream if you're just in the boat and you're enjoying the ride and you try to compare notes and really look to encourage those around you because we're all in this together. It's not easy, so I try to
Dude,
look
that
for the
was
good stuff.
the good stuff. That was great. It evoked Bucky Fuller. We're all crew, no passengers.
I love that. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Okay, so what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, obviously, I have a great love for books. So reading was always a go to. I felt like there's no other medium that I can think of that you can engage with sort of a mental telepathy with another individual than reading their thoughts on a page. So whether it's I mean, you're talking about books can, you know, traverse time and space, and you can still engage with another human's perspective as you read. And that's kind of a magic to me.
Total
So,
magic.
you know,
And one thing we're going to get back to reading later, but just off the top here, did you become a reader more because your parents were telling you to read? They read by example or on your own?
well, my parents did have a bookstore that may have encouraged it, but for me, reading was more of a refuge. I think I found, I think I always found, when I was younger, especially the way social structures were put together a little confusing. And for some reason, I felt more, it was easier to access bigger thoughts and ideas that kind of helped illuminate what was going on inside people's minds. And also, from an entertainment perspective, I think the imagination that was in a lot of the books I read just fostered this. Well, it just felt every time I opened a book, there was kind of some excitement there. Like, what am I going to discover? What am I going to find out? And,
So,
you know,
this need or want, well, no, first of all, why do you think humans collect and gather information?
who to know we're not alone. I think
Yeah.
we're looking for connection, and I think we're hardwired for it. So we often get what we're looking for. I think if people are out there putting something out, there's an echolocation that happens when if you're out there looking for reinforcement of a certain truth, you'll usually find it. The question is how good are you at knowing yourself well enough to know that you're looking for the things that would help you the most? Does that make any sense? It's a little
No, it
confusing.
makes a lot of sense. Igor Stravinsky said, most people don't know what they like what they know.
Huh.
So it's not exactly what you're saying, but it's like if you just feed kids a certain type of book for 50 years,
Sure.
then they don't know, oh, there's other kinds of books.
Yes.
But we, we're sort of funneled into certain normality or commonality. I
Right.
we'll get into this all, and you sort of answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
Hmm. That's a good one. I don't know for sure. I can only speak to myself. And I think there was a part of me that always wanted to know more. Um, I had a really hard time understanding pat answers to big problems from the earliest times I can remember, in that I felt like having a certain amount of emotional intelligence was in some ways superior to just academic knowledge, because how else can we really understand each other until we understand why we pursue what we pursue? So, in trying to do a lot of self discovery, even as a kid, I think I was attracted to the idea that there was an innate need for me. I don't know if it's there for everyone, to better understand myself so I
Yeah.
could better understand the world. And conversely, have a better way to connect with other people, develop a language, you know?
Yeah, Jason, you get it. And it's really a lot of these questions are, you had ESP 2 accounts on what you just said. It was really articulate, and I appreciate that. But what you said was, I'm asking for percept more than concept in all this. I'm asking you for your hunch, your guess. So I asked you a neuroscientist kind of question. You go, "Well, I'm not a neuroscientist." I goes, "Well, I'm not. I don't care what neuroscientists say per se. I just want to know your hunch or
Yeah.
your guess." So that was good, and you really presage this question: do thoughts create emotions?
Well, they definitely generate feeling in me. I know that sometimes I try to create touchstones, especially for the creative process, that help me think a certain way. For example, if there's a film or a piece of music, or even getting together with certain people or friends, that I know that if I go to that place, it's going to generate certain thoughts. I'm going to probably either engage in a lively discussion, or I'm going to read something that inspires a feeling I used to have when I was young. I can better elaborate on it when I'm writing or creating something, because there's this elusive essence that I'm always trying to get to, that I feel is an honest, true tone. It's almost like the difference between a discordant tone and a pure tone, something that's in tune. And that tune is sort of a resonant sound that echoes and everyone can feel if it's articulated properly. So it's difficult to articulate a thought, but if you can come up with some way, even it's its simplest form, where you could say something that another person hears and goes, and you're guessing to the best of your ability that they're feeling that too, that they can concur and go, wait, I understand what you're talking about. And I feel that too. And it's a very exciting thing when you get that moment, because it feels like you both for that moment are resonating on the same frequency. And to me that's powerful.
Dude, you speak my language completely. I love all these words you're choosing. You can tell you're a reader because you got good vocabulary.
Thanks.
So, and kudos out to Janet Klein who introduced us, because I mean, there's someone who, in commonality, if we are going to see her or meet her like we do, we know we're going to have fun and it's going to be musical.
And
There's going to be,
she's got a unique gift too, Jerry.
yeah.
There's something about her that I've been I've tried to describe what she is to other people, and the best thing I can think of is sort of a force of nature that is somehow generating authenticity in spite of her obvious anachronistic presentation, where you go, at first I was like, wow, this person is not only doing this on stage, they live this way.
Yeah.
And then as I heard her speak, I went, she's filled with conviction. And not only that, but she's spreading this positive goodness in it,
Yeah.
that it's just so admirable.
Yeah.
She's a very special person.
Yeah. I agree. And so fill in the blank, Jason. I don't know what I think until I,
Until I feel and talk about it. I am a communicator. So I can't see it until my hands are in it and I can start to express in some way what it is I'm grappling with. So I'm not very good at being an internal person without a sounding board. I feel the need to discuss.
yeah, me too. Can humans think without language?
It's a little bit like a tree falling in the forest question, making a sound if you weren't there to witness it.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like that. I would like to think that we can function in a certain kind of abstraction. I guess music would be the closest thing I can think of, because you
Mhm.
can hear a piece of music and often you can sense the way it's affecting a group. And there's a communication, there's a language in music, emotion in music. But can we articulate ideas and thoughts? I don't know. Yeah, I don't
You
know that.
know, they remind me of tuba throat singers from Russia.
Yes.
They can put you into this transcendental state with
Yeah. The
their singing,
overtones and all
the
that. Yeah.
overtones.
Hmm.
And then I found out they're singing about three things: their boots, snow, and their horses.
Is that beautiful or what though? I mean, talk about something fundamental that
Yeah,
is something that everyone could agree upon within that culture or community. It's like when I say I have 60 horses in my herd, it might translate to them as wealth, happiness, power.
yeah,
Who knows what that means? An
yeah,
ideal, maybe, you
yeah,
know? And I love their music. I
yeah.
went to go see Hoon Her 2 Tuvan throat singing group several years ago, and I was transformed by that
Totally,
performance on a
totally.
deep level. Yeah.
Yeah. And to think Richard Feynman got him into the Rose Bowl parade, and
Ah,
they jammed with Frank Zappa at his house.
did they really? Oh my
Oh
god!
yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Well,
So,
Feynman was a really interesting dude, wasn't he?
oh yeah, he was. Chomsky says language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Sounds like what you just said. but
Well,
um,
I think he
but
said
what do you?
it better.
Yeah, but here's the question, Jason. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down?
I think you're left with languages of love, and I know sometimes people have tried to categorize those. The things that I've found in my experience that have communicated connection without language the best are acts of kindness or generosity without expecting, or not trying to consciously expect a return. Um, so, um, one of the, a gratifying experience I had once when I was young, what probably was one of those fork in the road moments, was I heard about a family that had fallen on hard times, and single mom, kids. I don't know if they were going through a divorce. I didn't know that much about them other than that they weren't going to have a Christmas. So I went out to a toy store and just bought all of the toys that I could imagine at that age would have made me the most excited, and filled a bag. and I found out where they lived. I hopped the fence, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I left a big, huge. It was a big bag that had used for a hold that used to hold lighting components for like a TV set. So it was a huge, big bag with a drawstring and filled with toys. Left it on their back porch. Got out of there. Never knew what happened, but that was the beauty of it in a way, is that I hoped that
Yeah.
it would be a anonymous gift of just showing that there somehow in the world there was care,
Yeah.
and that was a turning point for me in terms of looking to give. I got so much back out of that I didn't need an acknowledgement. That I guess where my heart has tried to pursue sense was, how many ways can we give, and what are the best ways to do it so that you're not doing it for the personal benefit as much as you are going, somebody out there knows pain and I know pain, and if I can help their pain, it's something I wish would have happened for me at certain times.
Yeah.
And if I could give it to someone and be the active person, then maybe in some way I've helped alleviate a little of that pain. That's worth
Beautiful.
doing.
Beautiful. Unconditional love. Boy, what a aspiration. Are people, your observations, are people, I know it's both and it depends, but are they more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, we are both, but I do sometimes wonder, I'll put it this way, with the advances in technology, there have been many, like all things, good things that have come out of it. But I do wonder if sometimes our base impulses are to matter. So with social media, of which I have a part in, my perspective on it has been sometimes to see through the clutter and to go, are we all trying to encourage each other? Or are we competing with each other? Or what can be done in any given medium that makes it worthwhile?
Yeah.
Because we are thinking and feeling beings, and
Yeah.
sometimes our left brain will dominate our thoughts, and that can be a good thing. And sometimes our right feeling brain dominates. And how difficult is it to navigate those two spheres? Maybe you just let it happen and
Yeah.
hope for them to do a handshake and get along as much as possible, you
You
know?
know, that's exactly what I say. You can't separate feeling from thought, but we can because we invented the words. So we think we can, and it's fine. I mean, 80% of people I ask go, we're more feeling beings. That's what they say. And I go, okay. My one friend mocks the whole thing. He goes, I feel we're more thinking beings.
Good answer.
Okay. Here's the two Alan Turing questions from 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I would love to think so.
That's good.
Um, I do think that the soul is underestimated. You know, obviously it takes a certain amount of faith to believe in a soul, but having witnessed death, passing of loved ones, and I was amazed by both the miracle of birth, having been through that with my kids, and of death with the passing of my parents, witnessing that transformation from something motivated to something inert. And since matter doesn't really change, but just as can be, I mean, it changes, it can be transformed, but doesn't disappear. It's an argument for who we are going in directions that are much bigger than the shell that we see.
Yeah,
So I think we're more than the sum of our parts, and I think our soul can feel and think,
beautiful.
in my
And the
opinion.
second Turing question was, can machines think?
Whew, that's bigger than my pay grade for sure. I don't know. Um, I just have to believe that at some point math becomes mystical, and perhaps on some level beyond the binary, maybe there is an access point or a machine could start to process differently, but I don't know.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Wow, they're intertwined. I mean, for me, meaning and happiness are partners. I don't know that I can be happy without meaning. I've asked myself this question actually this week. I was laying awake one of those insomnia nights and going, can we function without purpose? And and my fear sometimes is that with a popular narrative of purposelessness, people give into their worst animalistic behavior. And I like animals. Actually, animals can be very nice. But acting without a soul and just feeling like it's a dog eat dog, compete, revenge, all the negative stuff. I can't live in a world that would subscribe to that as its main reason for existing.
Dude, I dropped this question for quite a while now, for the last about year, but you anticipated. I'm not going to ask it to you, but it's interesting because I say, why is it so difficult for humans to consider the possibility that life may be pointless? So I'm not saying life is pointless.
Mhm.
I'm saying, why is it so hard? And people go, oh, because it has a point, or we want to make a point. But one time I was talking to this writer in a room with 40 of his friends, and I asked him that question. And he goes, we all know life is pointless. And all his friends went, yeah. And I was like, geez,
Right.
true to me. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away? Are we detecting it or are we more creating it?
Of course, my way of navigating is to try to be a receptor. So I'm listening and I'm receiving. So at least that's the way I perceive the world. So I
Yeah.
see the brain a little more like a receptor,
Yeah.
and I can then, with consciousness, I mean, I've seen so many coincidences that you could chalk up to various reasons, but I've seen so many symbiotic or parallel narratives that emerge from strangers, connectedness in unusual ways that I have a hard time arguing against consciousness as a collection and something we can all share. And occasionally, the miraculous can appear that defies science. And so I guess I'm on that camp, more receptor based.
Yeah. No, that was good. It really evoked because you're open. If you're open to it, you will see those things. And McLuhan called it complex clairvoyance, and Zappa called it conceptual continuity. There's
Wow,
like a thread running through everything. All you got to do is be open to it and connect the dots if you want.
I think
You don't?
so.
Yeah. So, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, considering I'm in my 50s, my thoughts don't speed along like they used to. But um, hmm. Well, it's hard to measure speed of thought, but I do feel that we are processing with lightning speed on a whole spectrum from body language to speech to intonation to personal experience to comparing notes. Our computational power as humans, I don't mean to diminish us to machine level, but we are processing incredible amounts of information, maybe even on a pheromone level as well.
Yeah.
So I'd have to argue for the speed of thought.
Dude, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. You can't Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? And just set it up. I start some of these questions with cue quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply them. You can if you want. You
Sure.
put all the questions into the context you want.
First of all, I like that it's worth thinking about the tools at all,
Yeah.
because I worry that these questions aren't posed often enough. And I think that they're important questions. I think we build our own toolbox as we navigate.
Yeah.
And where I may use, a screwdriver, someone else may use a hammer, and all are necessary in the construction of a bigger project. But on your personal project, your structure, your architecture, it's best when you can discover the tools for yourself that can help build the best version of who you are.
Yeah.
And I think only you can find that you're better suited to a wrench or a screwdriver than a hammer, with enough self-examination and note comparing to go, I'm not that, but I am this. And this tends to work. And when I do this, I like the person I'm becoming. And I can learn from it, and I can build a better me.
Jason, that's good, man. You're my hero. You're laying it out, man. You're laying out the blueprint. So I just added this question because tool sounds so serious in a way. What new toy do you suggest? You're a playful guy too.
Yeah, definitely. Toys are easier for me, definitely. I prefer the creative toys. I think I always did. So, I never liked it when they took my crayons away. And so I kind of like trying to keep the crayon box handy as an adult. And there's definitely a part of me that tries to foster the innocence that I maintained when I was young. And I'm not talking about naivety. I'm talking about that innocent sense of potential for good and for the best parts of what you want life to be. Because
Yeah.
you have a choice to make life and shape it. And a lot of people feel that it's conditional. And I just don't believe that. I think that obstacles give us more chapters to read in our own book, because a book without conflict is not an interesting story.
Yeah.
So,
You also evoked the McLuhan line. The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
that's nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I do think about death, but I think of it I think of it a lot like trusting that what was under the Christmas tree is what you wanted on
Wow.
Christmas morning.
Like,
In other
don't be
words,
disappointed.
well, it's not that it's not that I fear it being different than my expectation, as much as when I think about death, I'm looking forward to life's journey, and I anticipate more journey to come because I love learning and discovering. And one book series I wrote a few years ago was about, I tried to tackle the afterlife and tried to distill down an adventure that basically suggested this ongoing journey that was never devoid of conflict, but that you were equipped with new tools as you journeyed forward and got to learn to use those new tools or abilities to continue to discover that life of adventure. So, death is an adventure. Sometimes it's a little scary to think about, but on the other hand, I anticipate it with
Yeah,
some relish because there's something else that I have never done
yeah,
or experienced before. And
yeah,
so it's a mixed bag, isn't it? So sometimes that keeps me awake. The other things are, of course, the things that sometimes I can't control, like my kids, my wife. I just don't like to see people suffer, or the ways I've made people suffer keep me
Yeah.
awake. When I remember things I've done, I went, oh, that hurt them, because I'm suddenly aware of how it would have made me feel. And those are troubling thoughts too.
Can you forget to die?
I don't know. I think forgetting to die might look a little like being so comfortable with having thought about it that when the time comes, you're able to enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
So if you think of dying as a awful, scary, horrible thing that you're trying to forget about because you're trying to deny it exists, I think that's when you're in trouble. But
Yep.
when you think about it and go, yes, I'm going to experience that too, I want to be ready, and I want to, with whatever capacity I'm able, be present for it.
Yeah, my friend Bob Dobbs says that what happens to you after you die is whatever you believe's going to happen to you.
I've wondered about that.
And then
I thought about that. Yeah.
Paul Krasner nailed it. He says, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives.
Well, I've often wondered, what if the narrative we're writing for us now is going to be, well, I got into the whole thing during the pandemic, which was fascinating for me. I started really thinking about dreams, because I started going, what if I started channeling my dreams and using basically a 24-hour creative cycle where I could use what I dreamed, distill meaning from it, and incorporate it into my waking hours. So I did an experiment where I wrote a book that I haven't published yet or anything, but I got some copies made for me that were just taking my dreams and distilling the images and what I was learning at night into the day. And then I started to wonder if our dream life and our waking life are basically the same.
Yeah.
And of course, lucid dreaming is so interesting as well, that maybe the afterlife is sort of what we've paved in our conscious and subconscious. And we'll be able to better understand where we're going by doing the work here.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it sure fascinated me, and it sure created some really neat journeys. When you go to bed at night and you're thinking, where am I going to go next? That's
Yeah.
pretty fun.
It's amazing because you also evoked what McLuhan learned from James Joyce's book, Finnegan's Wake. And not to sound elitist, but he said artists dream while they're awake. Everyone has this amazing ability to create scenarios when they're sleeping. But artists do that also while they're awake. So he calls it dreaming awake.
Huh.
And so McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. You've already touched on this, like you're a receptor, you're detecting or receiving these signals from artists, not just artists, but musicians or poets or literature or whatever, video game designers. And what he learned was we can uncover the hidden psychic effects of our tools, of our inventions, and then learn how to cope with what we don't like about the invention. So, we live in a Facebook world. I'm not on Facebook. I have a couple Facebook pages. Someone else does it, but I don't. And I still live in a Facebook world. They
Mm,
can say I don't. You could say I hate Facebook or I love Facebook, but you live in a Facebook world. Sorry, So how's it affecting you?
right.
You can study that. So people will broadcast how it's affecting us. But this is the question I asked you, Jason, is what McLuhan probed for years is why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Fear.
Yeah.
I think sometimes ignorance is born out of a self protective nature or early development, and new ideas that challenge us, can inhibit us because we're afraid of the outcome or that we can't control the outcome. So I guess my feeling is that, for many, they have either negative imprinting on such a level that the trust factor is very low. And you
Yeah.
have to be a trusting person to trust what the input you're getting, whether it's from Facebook or the world at large, and interpreting it, that you can see within it something valuable. You're sifting for the gold.
Yeah.
That takes a little bit of courage.
Courage, man. You're bringing up great words. Fear, courage. Are you more afraid of old ideas or new ideas?
The thing is I love them both for different reasons, because I feel like without the past, we can't compare notes with what's gone before. But the new ideas keep us guessing and challenged, so we can learn to interpret them. When I'm at my most vulnerable or fearful, I fear I fear sometimes the new things that I come across, that I go, is this taking us in a good direction? Do I have any control of where this thought field matrix is taking people? But see, that's my fear of not having control. So I
Yeah.
soon have to relinquish it and go, what can I do with it that's positive? What can I do on a personal level rather than a bigger level that says, this is what I can own and learn to develop with?
Yeah.
And there's certain ideas from the past that were incredible that I would hate to lose. But then there's some things that are worth losing. That's dross. So you just go, that's not worth keeping.
You brought up a word. I'm always trying to figure out what it really means, but I'm going to just ask you vulnerable. What's another word for vulnerable?
Transparent.
Oh, nice. I like that. That helps a lot. And you're a parent, you know about transparency.
I mean, being a little more like a window than a door, and being able to exist, and it doesn't mean that you're less. It actually means somehow you can
Yeah.
function in an open, very open way that says, I'm going to try to be my most honest person I know how to be. And wherever that lands, it lands. But
Yeah.
it's a noble pursuit, I think, you know. Um,
Noble indeed. It reminded me also of the great Duchamp piece of art where there's a corner of a room and there's one door in the corner and there's two doorways. So
hmm,
you can never shut the door. So it's
interesting.
almost like turning the door into a window or like I mean, you can open and shut a window, but it just has that transparency like, go shut the door. Well, which way?
Yeah,
'Cause if I shut it this way, the other doorway's open.
that's right. Yeah.
It's really a trick. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Let me think for a minute. There's probably some that come to you at different times, but the one I'm thinking about right now, um, was a very early memory of being home with my mom, and I think we were watching Sesame Street. It was new, I think, at the time. But there was something, so she had a gift for, even though she suffered from a lot of abuse when she was young, she somehow, as a mother, was able to transcend her own hurt and parent both me and herself in some way that was able to take moments like that and make them a very intimate learning moment where you could watch something and start to discover concepts together. And she provided a very safe place to learn. And I
Nice.
think there was a nurturing, emotionally nurturing, place that was like, wow, we can learn some new concepts together. And I guess maybe that developed my sense of communal learning. And where I struggled the most in school was, when there wasn't engagement as a group, but more like a lecture, and I had to process on my own what I'd heard. It was much more difficult for me.
Beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Depends what you do with it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think I try to use it for betterment. There's some memories that are painful, but if I can not repeat them, I'm on the right track. If it was my fault that I did something wrong, I go, oh, I'll try to do better next time. But then there's others that are so sweet that you just go, that's like a great book you read and a chapter that you just can revisit over and over in your mind and generate those same feelings. I mean, those are pretty precious.
You mentioned your mom and her impact. Tell me someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you like that, role model, and what you specifically got from them, just briefly.
Well, interestingly enough, my wife, we have such a soulful marriage, real marriage of souls that she, people, I didn't know until we were together that idea of two people really kind of being just the right fit. I think it was her in my life that made me go, oh, this is a foundational person that not only helps me, I think, be the better version of me that I want to be, but I could spend a lifetime pouring into her and just trying to show my gratitude for that.
Wow.
So
That's
I would hold her there in that.
Jason, that's really beautiful. And so how many years you been married or together?
20,
How
20.
do you explain your longevity?
We listen to each other. We're really good at enjoying the ways we're alike because we do love a lot of the same things. And where we're different, we give each other a lot of room.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much love there. It's a relationship that doesn't get threatened easily by outside circumstances. And I think whenever there have been storms, we've we've tended to cling together rather than let it divide us. So years of investment, we pay attention to each other's needs. I look forward to getting up in the morning and making her coffee because I know how much it means to her.
Yeah.
And so those simple gestures, it's like money in the soul bank. I mean, you're investing in someone and you're giving to them your best. And I don't think that should stop when you're courting someone. It should be the endeavor of a lifetime to go, I want to give you my best over our whole life. And
Beautiful.
you know, it
Extend
worked.
that yeah, extend that puppy love for the whole time. So,
Yeah.
did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yeah, I was raised Christian. Although, there was a lot of I had to sort of discover my own I have a very open-minded liberal Christianity that tends to look for the best parts of Christ's teaching, the loving each other, the the more the things that had to do with he was so counterculture. A lot of people have tried to use religion as a way to divide or protect themselves. And obviously, he didn't use it to protect himself, it was about his sacrifice. So I wanted to cling to that notion of compassion and love in that message. And therefore, I found brothers and sisters across the planet, no matter what they believe, as long as they're holding to those tenets. So I find the commonality in that language.
Yeah.
So it's less dogmatic. It's a lot more liberal in that I feel that what he spoke had lasting value. And unfortunately, like many things, can be corrupted, used for many ways to divide, to hurt, to injure. But he allowed himself to be injured. He wasn't the one that was out there with the boxing gloves on.
Yeah.
He said, I am going to do an act that transcends the natural to the supernatural. And I find a lot of hope in that. And so I
Beautiful.
guess it's foundational for me.
That's good. Great, great words, man. Jason, you really did it. Okay, do you pray?
I do. Yeah.
If God exists, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
Um, I think if there was one thing, I mean, I think I would love to look at him and have us both laugh.
Oh,
And, like
nice.
and look at each other and go, it's so good to see you.
That's
Because
good.
I feel like I want to know him.
Yeah.
I want to know him, and I don't want to know him in uh, I want to know him in a soulful way that recognizes soul, so
Yeah.
that if I see him, I could go, "There you are. It's been too long." That's how I would feel. You know,
This guy the other day said, "What do you want God to say to you after you die?" He says, "Oh, we checked the records. We made a mistake. You're going back." Sound like
that's
a Jimmy
funny.
Stewart movie. Okay, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Again, I think so many answers are both.
Yeah,
From my point of view, I do think evil does exist. I see it as an entity. I don't know how to classify it exactly. I mean, you have your Lucifer Satan idea, which may be symbolic. It may also be true.
yeah,
But I would say I would know better what evil is by action. That tells me more. When I see action, I better know almost everything. I can tell who people are by what they do, and there I would know evil by what it does. And so if I see evil, it most often is the opposite of compassion. It's usually selfish, and it's often motivated for a variety of reasons. But when that injury is motivated by a desire to try to feel better about oneself, or sometimes just to inflict harm, um, I feel like I recognize it. I can see it.
yeah,
And, one of those, it when you see it kind of things.
definitely. So this is related. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I'll set this up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
If you acknowledge your enemy, I think it's an important part of the process is to understand this person might have ill intention towards you. Because if you don't recognize your enemy, it's very difficult to categorize, why you might be feeling the way you are. And the enemy is often here. So for me, most of the enemies I have are here. Um, I can't really think of many people that I would classify as an enemy, but I would say I try to learn from my enemies because they tell me something about myself. And then if it's a physical enemy, I used to take martial arts, and I found that most struggles on the physical are over it's over quickly. The damage that comes from your adversary is what goes on in your mind and how it affects your behavior. So, mental damage, emotional damage has far more reaching effects than physical damage to me.
Jeez.
So,
That's powerful. And it's also, you evoked Bruce Lee, who was into Alan Watts heavily.
hmm,
And this martial arts kid taught me, like, I use the word judo and jujitsu a lot in our studies. And he said the best fights are the ones you never fought. It's
uh,
like, how do you not even fight it? But
yeah,
you evoked a lot. The American Indians, indigenous say your enemy is your best teacher. So Onward. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. Volta Cinema, but he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Faulkner, years later, said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play, people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because familiarity breeds contempt. And we tend to take for granted those things we see every day until they're presented in a new way. And I do believe there's an importance to taking something and giving it a perspective and then comparing that note. You may see a tree differently after watching a movie or seeing a photograph by Ansel Adams, and you go, I never appreciated the majesty. I took it for granted.
Yeah.
So it helps. It's just like it's a magnifying glass. It draws
Yeah.
attention to something, you know,
I like
for
that
me.
magnifying glass. So, what walk us through just briefly the history of your pursuits and your calling? I mean, you're an animator and then you're a book writer. I mean, that's your two main things, wouldn't you say?
Sure.
And what was the tipping point? You're growing up watching Sesame Street or animations and you go, "Hey, I want to do that." And
Mm,
then at what point, you're reading books, your parents have a bookstore, you're reading books. At what point you go, "Well, I want to write books," but more so like your college career and your pursuit, an actual, those will be my career.
mm. Well, it was difficult because, my parents didn't go to college, and being blue collar people, they weren't really able to advise how to go towards the arts as any kind of career. So, and pre-internet, of course, you had what you had at the library, and we're lucky enough to find a couple people along the way, maybe. And in my case, I remember the way Sunday nights watching Wonderful World of Disney made me feel. There was something about Disneyland that had a very powerful effect. When I was 6 years old, my parents showed up at school unannounced and said, "Come on." And I, first of all, didn't know why they were there. And they said, "We're leaving from Oregon, where I was in Portland. We're going to fly down to Disneyland." I was 6 years old. And I just went, I didn't know this kind of thing could just happen spontaneously. They packed our bags, my brother and I, we went down, and the whole thing was so powerful. It just had a very powerful effect on my brain that I had a I had a certain feeling like I had really walked into another world, but I think I also tapped into the intention behind it. Even at that young age, I felt I was receiving the emotion, the craft, but what was beneath it, this idea of the happiest place on earth. It's such a broad idea, but to try to do it, even though that may not be attainable, I mean, but to go, this is what I'm going to try to make. I'm going to try to make a place where people gather, where they can feel like a child forever, and probably or hopefully bring out the best in people, families, etc., by having them feel they were part of something. And I think it was profound. Books did the same. And so I think I never really saw myself able, and my feeble attempts at doing other things were so disastrous. I could not do business for the life of me, and yet I wasn't. I was a C student, and I doodled through most of my books, and so I think I just went after the things I knew because I loved them, and it was that love that just made me feel that, well, why not me? I love it so much. I'm just gonna do it. And so I didn't even I found out later, I got into the business on an accident. I had met a guy through the looking in the phone book. There was a guy that taught little kids animation in my town. I called him up and I said, I'm in high school. Can I learn? He said, "Oh, I teach 6-year-olds." So, but my son-in-law is here on the weekends and he works at Warner Brothers. I'll ask him if he might tutor you a little bit. So I would visit him on the weekends, and he was gracious enough to take the time. And I wasn't one of those super talented kids. I always felt like just because I wanted it, I was willing to learn. And so I would work and work. And I took my portfolio down to the studios and um, got a call back after, again, this is not a real big formal education. So I got a call back, and they said, where did you go to school? And I said, well, I had a little bit here and there. I took a few art classes, but he said, well, you've got some natural ability. Why don't you come in and take a test? And after the test, they granted me a job as an in-betweener at Bluth Studios on a movie called All Dogs Go to Heaven. And I found out shortly after, the person who was running the production told me, he said, you're not even supposed to be here. He said, you were accidentally put in the accept pile when you were supposed to be in the reject pile. And I thought, oh. So I got in by accident. So I thought, okay, well, because there are no accidents for me, it was like, this is an opportunity to learn. So it was just pure desire. And even backtracking a little, the very first portfolio I turned in at Disney, we got a call from them, and my dad said it's Disney on the phone, and I was thrilled. I thought, wow, they called me. And the person in charge of recruitment there said, I just called to tell you, you haven't got a chance. And he went out of his way to say, there's many people I would say go to art school, but in your case, your attempt at a few smudgy life drawings, he goes, you should do something else. Don't bother. And I got off the phone. It was 16, 17 years old. My dad said, if you want it, don't give up,
Wow, he
So
told you that. That
it
is
was
a good
just what
dad.
I needed, to just
That is,
enough, like
yeah.
Dumbo's feather, to go, okay, then that's all I have, because I don't have encouragement on any level. And so it's going to have to come from in here. And so, yeah, and even with the book thing, it was, everyone told me, forget about being published. You're not going to get published. Nobody gets published. And I published my book myself. And it turns out an agent, oh, not an agent, editor found it at a comic book convention, and it had some illustrations in it, and they said, hey, we're interested in this book. So back doorways in, or windows, or chimneys, that's my familiar ground. I don't know how to go through the front door, because the front door has always been closed.
Jason, that Al Flipside, the punk magazine that spawned Matt Groening and everybody, all the LA punk scene, Flipside. Al says his motto is "Don't sell out, sneak in."
That's great. I love that. That's really
And
good.
so a screenwriting teacher taught me or told me that a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art or great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, I create from my subconscious and my soul. So when I'm writing, I trust that what I'm writing is a book I would have liked to have read. And therefore I don't always know, besides a general idea, what should happen, other than, am I excited to keep reading? Because
Yeah.
if I'm not excited, nobody else would be. So I try to write from the perspective of, as this voice, and it often comes through in a film, I watch a movie in my head, and I'm doing my best to keep up as quickly as possible with what I'm seeing. And sometimes when I'm writing, my eyes are almost closed. It's like I'm watching something, and it's so intense. I've even felt, almost not literally, but it's almost been a superimposition, where coming up from writing, the vivid movie that I'm trying to watch as I'm watching the story happen. I'm trying to get down on paper. And so when I animate, I mean, having worked at Disney and everything else for a lot of years, it was great training ground and getting to meet a lot of the old guys, that were part of it. I felt like teachers were everywhere. And, but when it came to my own work, I would take the fundamentals and then try to operate from the subconscious or from like some of my animation is doing my best to capture a feeling I might have had when I was young in a piece of animation. Sometimes it can just be a funny joke, and if it's funny, I'm going, the purpose for this is to hopefully make someone smile. That's a powerful thing. If
Yeah.
you can change a dynamic in someone's day where they went from, man, this day is just going to be terrible and challenging, and yet I saw that little thing and it made me just feel a little differently for that moment. It's like a spark. So I see that a cartoon can be, to me, as powerful as going to the Louvre if it's done with honesty and it's got a purpose behind it. And the books I write, I try to operate from a what am I trying to say? With every book, there has to be something underneath this that matters to me. That if I communicate it, more often than not, most of my writing has to do with um, an outsider who finds relationship, and within relationship they find hope. And it just seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of my work. And even though it's for kids, it's that 9 to 12-year-old age for me that was so powerful for reading that I often feel I'm still there. So I'm writing there, I'm going, listen, let me tell you a story, and it's somebody hopefully you can see yourself in, and in that story to say, just like my dad said to me, you can do it. There's hope. You can do something even though everybody else said no.
Yeah.
There's still a way through. And I cling to that. It's very important.
Very good. And Jason Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're making your art?
I do. It's important. I don't think of it in terms of them necessarily trying to, I want them to be happy, but I think of them in terms of being an effective communicator.
Yeah.
In other words, if I pose an idea out there that nobody understands, what value is it?
Yeah.
But I hope there's other people like me out there in my work that see it and we resonate on a frequency. And if it's some kid that in reading that book will go, wow, I didn't know that the world could be a positive place. If there's somebody else out that's a cheerleader out there going, you're going to be okay. If you think about this, if you think about that, I think that um, challenging thought and saying you can dare to hope is a very powerful thing, because we get a negative message. Negative messages come all the time, you know. But if you have hope, you can get somewhere.
It's beautiful. And so McLuhan said everything we invent extends some humanness. So clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth,
Hmm.
the shutter in a camera is extension of our eyelid. Philosophy or religion could be extension of our consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? And you use it in both ways. I mean, you use it as a sketcher for an animation, and you use it to write a book. And I mean, it's even the same, say, the tool is the keyboard or the writing utensil. What humanness does that extend for you?
It puts my soul on the page. It allows me to take the invisible and make it visible.
Yeah.
Um, I've often thought of the tarot card, the magician, and the saying "as above, so below." And I've thought about that and thought about taking the immaterial, making it material, trying to be the conduit for the invisible to the visible. That's the magic of both animation, which is an illusion of life, and a book that, I mean, can you think of anything that you could hold in your hands that takes you to another place, another world? I mean, it's the closest thing to magic I know of. So
Yeah. I like
being a magician, you know.
like that talk about the magician. I know that as above and so below. Does that mean like your interior? McLuhan had a book called The Interior Landscape. So it's like what's inside your head. So he actually took off from the poet T.S. Eliot and said, poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I would say, you know, my inner dialogue is a film. I'm image driven,
Yeah.
so most of what happens inside of me, you know, I think maybe I didn't possess a tremendous amount of talent, but I did get an extra helping of imagination. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that I see in my inner world are very vivid and quite formed. So when I'm watching movies play out, um, you know, that's how I better am able to communicate. So
Beautiful.
I don't know. What was the question
No,
exactly?
no,
Oh,
you answered it. What form is your inner dialogue in? You said
it's like a
visuals. Yeah.
film. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you said film. You didn't say visuals. Film specifically. It's amazing. So, Michael Apted, I spoke with him 40 years ago, and he made a documentary on a Russian rock star. I said, "Why did MTV rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast?" Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but really flourished in in 40 years ago in the 80s with MTV.
Hmm.
Rapid editing. He said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Well, I think when you have competing sources, there can be a manic energy that emerges in trying to keep up with being the loudest voice in the room. Um, so sometimes it's governed by economics. Um, I still believe that storytelling, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, a great narrative, sometimes you need time to settle. And other times you can handle something rapid fire. But I've been in some experiences, maybe it's age, where I've left an assault of image and sound and picture and not know what to do with all of it. That I never quite knew what was happening because it came at me so fast. I may have picked up on energy and walked away with a feeling of, wow, that's a powerful experience, like a Pink Floyd concert with lasers. You know, it's like sometimes, though I would say that's more poetry, there is a sensory experience that film can translate. But for my money, like a good poem or a great song, you need your slow ballad, you need your, you know, thrumming, powerful anthems. You need it all.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like saying you only get to color with blue or green. You need the box, you know?
Is it the hidden question here, Jason, is interesting. Is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
I think we'd like to think we can, but we don't end up doing one thing very well. I
Yeah.
think we can dart between things, but I don't know that we can engage completely in any of them if we're doing too many things.
What do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Not necessarily what anthropologist or Herzog said in his movie or whatever. What's your gut feeling?
I think it was expressing something that he felt needed to be noticed or remembered or interpreted on that wall. And I think he also needed to do it, or she, in order to return to it to remember what they had seen so that they could better contemplate it.
Yeah.
And the fact it's lasted may have had something to do with it too, is I need to put a marker here because this meant something.
Yeah, a couple of my heroes. George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says, there is no self expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me.
Hmm.
I know it's both and it depends, but just your hunch again. Is art making more self expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology or culture is dominant?
I think art isn't much of a choice. If you've tuned into the frequency, you feel like you have to do it. And in my case, some I if I don't hear those transmissions and interpret them or those films, I get I get very uncomfortable. I have a very difficult time. It's like it's a reservoir building, and I have to do something with it. Um, so for me, it's almost like I don't get to have the option because even if I weren't being paid to do it, I kind of have to. I don't know how not to, and I don't mean that in some arch way. It's just more that you know it's as important as eating and
Yeah.
drinking. And it's not that what I have to say is particularly important, other than it would be like going through the world and never speaking.
Yeah.
It's a vocal, it adds some sort of communication that I can't put into words sometimes, or can in a book. I don't know. That's a hard one. It's difficult because I criticize indulgent art because sometimes I feel that art done for the wrong reasons adds to the commotion and clutter. But I look through it for those pure voices that say, no, 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 listen, I want to share something with you and tell you something and connect with you. And I think Ray Bradbury did that for me quite a bit growing up. And something in his work was both poetry and imagination and potential. Um, and when I got to meet him when he was late in life, and it meant so much to me, it was interesting that the thing he asked me to do, I brought along a collection I'd had since I was a kid. And he said, "That's a good one." He said, "Read me the foreword."
Wow.
And so I read his foreword, his words back to him. And I had never noticed how beautiful that foreword was until I'd read it aloud. And it was basically a foreword that encapsulated a lot of why he writes and his life and process. And to hear that from another person, it was really profound, to engage there. And I remember he just wanted to hold my hand while I read it to him. And it was suddenly I felt almost this like familial, almost like a grandfather kind of feeling, and definitely a mentor. But it was also just quiet and simple and intimate in that way, and special. And I'll treasure that for as long as I live. It was like that was the power of words by a great storyteller. But in a way, as he was departing this life, he was reminded a little of it through a complete stranger. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you're talking Venice homeboy there, Ray. He did that stuff right down the block across from Beyond Baroque. But it's pretty amazing, Jason, how what you trans communicated to me was transferred to me was that there are stuff, even though you're so good with words and you're articulate, there are some things that are unwordable and
Yes,
unnameable. And
that's
that
true.
that's the beauty that you can recognize it. And you almost touched on Paul Schrader's great line, the role or the job of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail.
Well, when you're taking care of a family and you do art for a living, this art and commerce thing is complicated.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, occasionally it stops being about the art as an individual expression and more about how you're engaging with your fellow coworkers to
Yeah.
make something. Just as simple as building a clubhouse when you were a
There,
kid, going, let's work together and make a clubhouse.
there you go. Now, the hidden question to that question was, can art making be egoless?
Wow. I don't know. if the ego is defined by, it coming from a very private personal place, then I don't think it can be. However, I do think there's a choice to be made in judging art's reception by an audience response and how you respond to its effect. In other words, if it builds up arrogance or ego, it'll probably inhibit your ability to make great art. But it does, the best art comes from a personal place, and your ego has to be involved, I guess, in order to do that. Um, but I think one of life's ambitions is to remain the conduit for it and to sort of divert the attention where it belongs. Um, because self-aggrandizing usually is a pitfall and often leads to misery and often inflicting more pain on other people around you. And in my case, you know, nobody knows really who I am. I've done some things. I cherish the relationships, the real ones, even
Well,
these amazing questions you're asking me, which I've never been asked before, but I enjoy so much. It's like that connection with you on this. I'm gonna remember that my whole life. And
well,
Janet Klein and people like that, I go, that has so much to do with why I'm doing these things. You know?
Jason, that really means a lot to me because this one friend of mine says I want to interview you, and he says, "Can't we just talk?" And it's like me and you could have met at a Janet Klein party and just
Yeah,
talked and
yeah.
been in the corner for 15 minutes and done this. But it is something I just fell into, and now this Zoom thing has enabled me to do like 4 a week now, and it's quite amazing when I hit somebody like her and I says, "Do you have any suggestions?" And she sent 20 people. And it was like, I mean, it was like amazing because it doesn't matter. I don't interview people because they're famous or they did something great. I interview people because they're willing to sit through 90 minutes of stupid questions. But it is, it's more these jumping off points. You know what I'm talking about. So the next one's perfect follow up to that. Is perception reality?
Oh, it has a lot to do with what we think reality is. I mean, how else can we define our world except how we see it and
Yeah.
interpret it? The fun part is comparing notes on what we perceive.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really interesting because I love to, though we're in this forum, if we're ever at a Janet party, I'd like to turn the tables and go, Jerry, I want to know your answers to these questions. I want to compare notes with you
Yeah.
because I'm very curious, and I also find it that sharing of perspective to go, wow, I gained new insight to my reality through that conversation.
Yeah.
And hopefully positive relationships. Again, I really think that's why we're here, is to form positive relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about relationship. It's really amazing. So, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're usually taught to overcome a weakness.
Hmm.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I had severe obsessive compulsive disorder when I was a kid. Didn't have a name for it back then, but I had a lot of anxiety. I washed my hands constantly. I mean, till they were red and raw. I was trying to control a world that was difficult to control because, my parents, we moved every 6 months. My mom had, she'd been hospitalized for her emotions at certain points. And, I even had memories growing up where I was about 6 and my dad said, we need to go out and look for mom. I was like, where's mom? He said, I don't know, but she's walking around somewhere out in the neighborhood. And she wasn't crazy, but she was very troubled. So I think my young mind was trying to control my world. And for some reason, having no tools, OCD was, and they joke about it as somebody who just wants a picture frame hung the right way. It's much deeper than that. It's a deep anxiety that is like a record being stuck. So when I was about 13, I I remember being so miserable and thinking to myself, at one point, I wonder if I could go one full minute without having to rush into the bathroom and wash my hands. I remember sitting in the armchair and watching the clock, and every bit of my body was tense, fighting every urge I had to not do that. And then I told myself, can I go two? And I just kept challenging myself for days. Can I go further? And sometimes I would only make it 5 minutes and I'd have to run in there. And it's hard to explain to someone that battle for the mind. But in my case, I knew the only way to fix it was going to come through something in here. So eventually I broke its control on me and had to step outside myself to do it. And I think for some reason that just was something that gave me this feeling that in life, those strangleholds can all be broken with taking perspective outside of yourself and going, what's really happening here? And then looking beyond yourself at the situation and going, that's what needs to be done.
That was amazing. But you mean, I hate to be too personal, but
No,
without meds or a shrink, you did that on your own?
I did. I
Oh,
did.
look at
I found out later it's an actual form of therapy. I think it's called conditional behavioral therapy or just behavioral therapy. I'm not sure. There's a name for it. But yeah, I had conceived it myself.
yeah.
And there wasn't, my parents didn't really believe in psychiatry or anything like that. My mom had an aversion to it, of course. So, barring some sort of supernatural miracle, I just felt like this pattern is going to keep going unless I stop it. So
Wow.
I've tried to look for other patterns in my life ever since that I go, that's a negative pattern. There's no reason you can't work to break those patterns if you're trying to be self aware.
That is pretty astounding, dude. That's inspiring. Jason, I asked for 90 minutes. We only got about 8 more minutes left, unless you're willing to go a little longer.
I'm good to go as long as you want to.
Okay. Tell me one major element of your creativeness, because you've been doing it for years. One major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
I think when I was younger, I my goals were broader, change the world kind of stuff, and building great, grand, big things. I've come to really appreciate the haiku version of creativity more. That something something done well and pure and even small has more value to me. So from a process standpoint, sometimes I try to do 10 seconds of animation for myself. Or if I'm writing, I'm trying to rewrite to get down to distill. If I could take out another word, I will. If that word doesn't say it well enough, can I find a better one? And just compact, make it concise, but clear rather than filled with a lot of extra fluff that's just rambling.
That's really a great aspiration, dude. All artists are like, it's like that's the key right there. But you really nailed it with probably without even knowing. The industry standard is 10 seconds.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. I've lectured to art students. I go, like, if I send you a video or an audio, like how many seconds will you listen to? Like 10? Or they go, well, maybe 30. And then I met my friend's a pro in New York, and he goes, the industry standard is 10 seconds. I like, at this point in my life, it's like 3 seconds. I like, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
No.
I know.
But it is interesting that you use the word haiku, because that's, you put it in this realm of poetry, and we could go on and on about poetry, but I love to say the Gary Snyder, the beat nature poet. He says poetry is seeing the world without language, then putting that seeing into language.
Wow.
So it's like,
That's amazing. Yeah.
and then the other one you really got was, to me, which I love to repeat as my mantra, is Wyndham Lewis. And he said we artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. Now it sounds gobbledygooky, but it's actually like, you by being simple, you're trying to live in the moment. There's only so much you can do in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And so, you just do a sketch. It's like, oh no, now I've got to make a feature film out of this sketch, in
Yeah.
the sketch alone. And it's great if you can make it, but
Sure.
it's like you made a sketch or you made a haiku. Wow, that's a
And
lot,
if
you know.
while you were doing it, you were present in the moment,
Yeah.
and if coming away from it, you know, you can look at it and feel that it's mostly true, you've done something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to do that. It's hard
Yeah.
to use the right words. It's hard to find the right drawing. And sometimes I have to use both when I'm creating. In order to write better, I may need to draw the character I'm writing about so I can visualize it even more tangibly. It's challenging, but isn't it a wonderful work? It's a joyful work,
Yeah.
you know. It's
It is.
painful, but
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
joy.
yeah. And it can be joy and pain. It's like James Joyce blended two words, laugh and tears.
Huh.
So instead of laughter, he calls it laugh tears. But he nailed it. They said, he's working on Finnegan's Wake, and they go, well, how's it going? He's going, well, I'm a little stuck. It's taking me a week. I got these 12 words. He goes, well, you got 12 words. What's taking you so long? He says, I'm trying to put them in the right order. Figuring out the 12 words was hard
Yeah.
enough, but putting them in the right order.
Oh yeah. Oh, I get that is
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I've thought about that. Um, Trust. Um, I'd also say, you're not crazy. Um, I would give myself the encouragement that I wanted an external source to give me, probably. But I worry that I would undermine what I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a way, I'd almost go, I'd almost just like to do the same thing I would have done or will do one day meeting God, is laugh and nod. And
Yeah.
there you are. And
Yeah.
hopefully we would recognize each other.
Oh, yeah. My favorite answer ever was Lee Harvey Oswald's girlfriend, not his wife. His girlfriend wrote an amazing book. And I didn't ask her any questions about that. Just asked her all these questions. I said, you're walking down the street, you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say? And she goes, I love you. And I was like, we both started to cry. I mean, that is like, what else could you say to yourself?
That is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. It's so
Isn't that
nice.
amazing? Like
Mm.
Dr. John, the great boogie woogie pianist, he answered all these. He goes, I won't go there because it was too like voodoo, like your time travel. I won't go there. How do you find peace of mind?
Wow. Um, well, my battlefield, my mind, when it is in turmoil, I go to places that I are oasis respite spots that I've kind of established as anchor points. More often than not, when I stop thinking about me, I'll sometimes just ask my wife about her day, and suddenly I'm not really thinking about me anymore. And I start listening to her, or I ask other people how they're doing, or I pay attention to our dog, or I talk to my kids, and I get my mind off myself.
Yeah.
That often usually helps the most, you know.
Good. Beautiful. So these are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words. Who started it all?
Well, for me, God started it all. But separate from that, it started when I owned my decision making and my own uh, ability to navigate and didn't turn it on to other people's responsibilities. Started when I broke some of those compulsions and ways of seeing the world that felt so limiting and took a risk. Sorry, it's more than two words.
That's all
Way
right.
too
That
verbose.
no, that was beautiful. You can suss it out. That's cool. Are we going to make it?
Yes, if we want to. Yeah,
Where do we put it?
we put it in a box, we wrap it up, and we give it to the person next to us.
Oh, nice. Who's cleaning it up?
Me.
Is it serious?
It never was meant to be. No.
Oh, beautiful. You did great on those. Okay, just a few more. Jason, what a pleasure. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
I used to randomly put it on there for whatever reason. I just put it on. One day my wife told me, put it over. And as soon as I saw it mattered to her, I put it over ever since.
That is great. My really actually I'll set it up. The next question I learned from the guy who's just like this wise Altacucker. He used to sit on the Venice boardwalk and he was just an amazing guy, but just seemed like a normal guy. But he would say very wise things to me. And he taught me this question. Oh, and but basically he says, with your wife, if she wants the window open, you want it shut, just leave it open. What's the big deal?
Exactly.
So I like that. Your wife told you that. But here's the question he taught me. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Start swimming.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography, just off the top of your head, what would the title be?
He did a lot with a little.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Vanilla caramel.
Ooh. They want to have a color of ink other than black on a few pages. What color?
Green.
Nice. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I'd like a statue of me made in chocolate that would last only as long as the invitees were allowed to break off a piece. So hopefully it only lasts an hour and people
Dude,
could enjoy something from it and go, there was sweetness there.
I'm a chocoholic, man. That is a great idea. Dark or milk chocolate?
I prefer dark chocolate. I like
Yeah,
the deep, rich, straight from the bean, right to the vein chocolate.
agreed, dude. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had, but I never want. Fame.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's good,
Yeah.
but I don't
No,
really want it.
people say it's good because the answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
Ah,
That is like, whoa.
wow.
Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time.
Hmm.
You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes, Jason. I'm really grateful, and I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Again, it's trying to be transparent. I want to own all my weaknesses, all my strengths, see them clearly in a mirror, and to be open to everyone else, so that if I'm not honest, I'm nothing.
Yeah. On what occasion do you lie?
Usually it's if I'm afraid that I've failed someone I care about, the temptation to lie is there because it's a person you intended to hurt, you didn't want to hurt the most. So if a personal failure comes in, the temptation to lie is there. I try really hard to recognize it, identify it, and tell the truth.
Yeah.
But when you're wrong, it's very important to me to admit it and to say, I really failed here. I'm going to try to do better next time. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I loved what you said. It really evoked this question we've been asking people on the boardwalk and filming their reaction. And we asked them questions about their mother. And we quote Alice Walker. She said, "Yes, mother, I can see you are flawed. You have not hidden it. That is your greatest gift to me."
Hmm,
That
that's
is that's amazing, because you want to look up to your parents as not being flawed.
yeah.
So if they show you they are flawed and they don't hide it. That is a great gift.
And my mom was definitely that person that had such love
Yeah,
and was also flawed, but so sensitive. And
yeah,
that you go, what a role model. And my dad too, he was okay with saying when he was wrong, and he was okay with showing my brother and I affection,
yeah,
hugging when I needed to knock on the door at 12 at night going, Dad, I'm terrified of Sasquatch, because we lived in the Northwest. Too many nights, that idea, or of having a twin, that was another one that kept me awake. He took the time to get out of bed, having to go to work the next morning, and just sit with me and talk. That's a precious gift, you know.
wow, pretty heavy. Well, I don't want this to end, but we got two more and we're out of here, Jason. Thank you so much. What's
Sure.
the what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I think in times of adversity, many people are forced to confront um, patterns of repetition. And so I see that in a quest to better understand each other and to have more compassion for people all over the spectrum. There's a nugget in there of saying, can't we be better humans?
Yeah,
And Hollywood can package it and try and sell it and make money off of it, but it doesn't mean that there isn't something good in there.
yeah,
That maybe with people trying to be, oh, you're a different ethnic background or gender, or you come from this place. Maybe I was a little more privileged than I realized, and can better understand you and where you're coming from. Tell me more about yourself. But then to also say, and I, for the skin I'm born in, want to be on the firm footing together of humanity and say we're all sharing in this together. So I want to offer you compassion for where you've been, raise you up, and let's walk together.
yeah,
That's I think there's some movement going on there, and
yeah,
there's a quest for that, you know. I also think there's this battle right now between what's artificial and what's real. And I think the metaverse and the idea of the metaverse is tantalizing as a storytelling tool and could be used for good. But I do also believe there's some people running because they want meaning and they want identity and they want to be able to say I matter.
yeah,
So the best thing I can do to people I meet is to tell them, just like I would say to you, Jerry, is you matter, Jerry.
yeah,
You matter. You've made an impact on my life tonight just talking.
Oh,
and it
that's
matters a lot to me.
yeah, it does totally. It does to me, Jason. Amazing. And you really evoked, both Krishnamurti and McLuhan said violence is humans' quest for identity.
Mhm.
And it's such a heavy thing to think because, I'm for peace, I'm for making the world better. But why is it that why is it that the history of literature and movies is violence? I don't want to see violence, I hate it. It's like, why have violence? I don't need Clint Eastwood's gun stick in my face in every billboard and down the street. Why can't we have something nice? But I want to put a bonus question in because this is so fun. But I think I read you're fond of sailboats.
Yeah.
What, just briefly, what's your history? Where did that come from? And what do you got? You got a big one or just small ones? Like, do you go, tell
Well,
me your
my
sail.
when I was young, my uncle would visit occasionally, and he and his wife lived on a boat in Alaska, and he had a lot of adventures up there. And I always look forward to him coming down. And I thought to myself, one day, if I ever have the chance, I'd like to have a boat too. And I, you know, was lucky enough to get one, and I lived on it for a couple years. And I knew nothing about sailing, but I remember the first night I moved on when I dreamed I'd done something wrong and the boat sunk, and I was up to here. And so shortly after, I just put off the lines, turned on the motor, and hoisted the sail. I didn't know anything about it and just went, I got to go out there. And so I started just learning to sail out on the water and just learning what the wind did. And one time I, was in a shipping lane, and they said, get out of the way, your boat's going to be crushed. And didn't know what I was doing. But that's kind of a lot of how I've learned is by experience. So I just kept doing it. I found it brought this something about working with the ocean
Yeah.
is a great learning tool. And so, yeah, in the end, I moved off the boat, of course, when I got married, and my son has a boat now, and he lives on that. And there's something magical about a sailboat.
How cool. I love it. Last question, Jason, is what gives you the most optimism?
Conversations like this,
Yeah.
um, it makes me just feel hopeful.
Yeah.
People like Janet Klein that seem to exist almost like a character right out of a book, but she's so much more than that. And people I admire like that, creative people. And usually when I meet people that truly want to know
Yeah.
and care, I just go, man, there's hope.
Yeah.
you know? So
Hope is there. All right, Jason, thank you so much. It's been truly enlightening and I really appreciate it.
thank you, Jerry. It was a real pleasure.
I'm going to hit the out button, but I hope it goes on forever and ever.
Okay, you too. See you on the other side.
Later.